Hey everyone, it's Charlene. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use your Slimline stamps and stencils to make an A2 size card. Let's get started. Here I'm starting out with a 3.75 by 5.25 inch card panel, and I'm just taping it down to my craft mat. This is how I like to do slimline stencils. If I'm working with smaller size stencils, I will oftentimes use one of my silicone mats. So what I've done is I've mounted the slimline stamp to a slimline sized acrylic block, which is really handy. And then I'm just taking the stamp and I'm kind of hovering over my piece of paper there. And I'm trying to figure out where I want my placement to stop on the left-hand side. I'm going about a third to a half of the length of the slimline stamp. And so you're going to see I'm just using some Post-it tape and I'm using that to block off the areas that I don't want to ink. So I'm coming in here with some VersaMark embossing ink and I'm just going around and making sure I get a nice even covering. Now here I should have taken off the Post-it tape, but I wasn't thinking because my son was actually talking to me, and so I missed taking it off. Not the end of the world, but if you're doing this at home, take the Post-it tape off because the whole point is that you're trying to stop that embossing ink from transferring beyond that certain line. So all I did is I took a dry, flat paintbrush and I used that to wipe away the extra bits of embossing powder. And here I'm using Antique Gold from Simon Says Stamp, which is a beautiful gold embossing powder. And I'm coming in with my heat gun and I'm just making sure I get everything nice and melted. So you can see I have the bottom part of my card that doesn't have any embossing on it at this point. So what I'm actually doing, I'm using the other side of the stamp and I'm figuring out where I need to mask off, where that line needs to stop. And I'm going to stamp the other side on the bottom of that card panel, again with the VersaMark embossing ink. And then I'm going to heat emboss with that antique gold powder. This works really well in particular when you have floral stamps. Today I'm using the Pinkfresh Daisy Slimline floral stamp as well as layering stencils. And it's really pretty. But if you have something else, just all you want to do is try and find a natural break in the pattern of the stamp. And you can mask there and move around and do different things. So I've used my embossing powder there, my anti-static powder, and then again coming in, just getting some good even pressure. And you can even use a pressure tool like I was there. I like to do that to just make sure it's really nice and even. Now normally the tape will hold your panel down to your craft mat, but mine came up, not a big deal. I just peeled it off of the stamp. So again, coming back in with the embossing powder, and you're going to see now it looks like this is what the stamp was meant to be. It doesn't even look like it was originally a slimline stamp. I love how this came out with the embossing powder. So now I'm using those layering stencils, and the Pinkfresh stencils, they have numbers in the top left-hand corner. And I'm going to be doing my stencils a little bit out of order, and I'm actually not going to be using all of the stencils. There are 6 stencils in this set, and it's a really beautiful layering stencil, but I'm only going to be using 4. I'm going to be using the 2 stencils that color the flowers and the 2 stencils that color the leaves. So stencil 1 in this set colors the main parts of the flower petals. And I'm coming in with some Bubblegum from Simon Says Stamp here for this. I want a nice light pink. And again, I've just masked off after I lined up the stencil where it needed to be. I've masked off so I don't get any ink from the other remaining stencil holes through on my card panel. So you can see that looks so pretty. And then I just lift up my stencil, move it down, and I do it from the other side. Get those lined up where they need to be. And having that embossing powder underneath really makes it easy to line up. And you don't have to use embossing powder. I just thought this would look really, really pretty with the embossing powder. But you can absolutely use black ink or any color of ink for that matter. And so I'm coming in on this side with the bubblegum as well. And there you can see that filled in all of the flowers. Now I'm moving on to stencil number 3. Stencil number 3 is the detail stencil for the flower petals. So I'm using a darker, one kind of step darker ink. And I'm using the Sweets color from Simon Says Stamp. So I'm just coming in, again, lining those up. And they don't have to be perfectly lined up with this set, which is nice because there's kind of a whimsical feeling to these flowers. So if everything's not perfectly aligned, it's not very noticeable. So I've come in, I've added those little detail colors, and now I'm coming in with stencil number 2. So I went out of order. I went 1, 3, now I'm going back to 2, and then I'm going to go to 4. 2 is the main part of the leaves and the stems. So I'm going to do this in a light teal color, and then I'm going to do the detail in a shade darker teal color. So I'm using Seafoam for this from Simon Says Stamp. I love this color. It's so pretty. I have this color in particular kind of all over my craft room, so it makes me happy. But then again, you just do one side and you're going to switch and do the other side of the stencil. And I'm reusing that same Post-it tape and the same purple tape that I'm using on the edges for each one of these stencils. So there's not a lot of waste there, which is really nice. And how dark you want this is completely up to you. That's the nice thing about the blending brushes is you can do multiple layers, and the blending brushes tend to start out pretty light, which is nice. So you can get some really light tones if you want. I came in a little bit heavier with the Surf because I wanted to have some really nice lines for the leaves and for the flower stems. So I'm coming in there, and I just have a little piece of scrap paper off to the side that I can kind of tap my blending brush on, because that just sort of helps, at least I think it helps. Maybe it doesn't actually help, but I think it kind of helps keep you from getting kind of streaky lines, I guess. So coming in here with a microfiber cloth, this works really, really well to buff off any ink that is sitting on the top of that embossing powder. So off camera, I went ahead and I used the Hey You stamp from that set, and I stamped again in that VersaMark, and I used the heat embossing. And I just threw this in here real quick because I wanted to show you guys how I clean my stencils. I have a flour sack towel that I keep in my craft room that is only for cleaning stencils. And I do this when I have ink on them. I just lightly spray them with my rubbing alcohol, and then I clean them off. Easy peasy, and they look awesome. So here I have taken a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 panel, and I love this technique. It's so easy and you get such a cool result. I have just come in here and I'm using my Score Buddy, and I am going along and I'm scoring at every 1/8 of an inch. Now, the main thing when you're doing this is you'll see that it doesn't really want to stay down, and it's a little bit time consuming. So make sure you have some tape on hand or some kind of heavy object in order to keep your paper from moving around. You can see I came in there with an acrylic block just to hold down that other side because it was trying to run away from me. So I'm doing each line twice so I can get a nice good score line on there, and it just makes the paper look so cool. I'm going to use this behind the main panel as my matting layer, which is going to look awesome. So coming in with my mini trimmer, I'm just trimming off the excess here on my main panel, and this is not really necessary, but I just didn't want to have a lot of white space around those edges. So I'm just trimming those down a little bit. So that panel ends up being a little smaller than that 3 1/4 by 5, or I'm sorry, 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. So now I'm using my dot runner and I'm coming in and I'm just getting the back of the scored paper. And you can use, you could do like every 1/4 inch or every 1/2 inch. There's all kinds of different things you could do. You could turn it and then do diamond pattern. I mean, like the possibilities, there's so many. So off camera, I did cut out a piece of craft EVA foam. I'm going to use that to add some dimension behind that main panel. And I'm just using my tape runner on this as well. And then I'm going to adhere it back to that to the back of that main panel. And then I'm going to put tape runner on the back of that and I'll adhere it to the scored panel. So real quick, if you guys are enjoying this video, please do hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. It really helps my channel and it helps me to bring you more crafty content in the future. Okay, back to the card. So I like to use the lines on my craft mat to make sure I'm get everything nice and centered. So I'm coming in, centering that panel, and once I like where it is, I'm going to commit and go ahead and push that down. And then I did use some really cute sequins from a confetti mix that I will link down below. I'll have all of the supplies that I'm using today linked down below in the description if you're interested at all. So I have placed them all around where the little flower buds are, which is why I did not use the colored stencil or use the layers to color on those stencils earlier, was because I knew I wanted to use this confetti to kind of create those little flower buds. I thought it matched the colors I was using so well, and I just love that combination of the blue and the tealish color and the pink and the green, the light green. I think it's very, very pretty. And going in, just a little dot of glue, and there it is. There's my finished card. All right, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this. I hope you break out your Slimline stamps and stencils and see how you can use them to make A2 size cards. Until next time, happy crafting.